Hi, welcome. Thank you all for coming here today, being so eager to sit here and listen to me talk. Most of you will have probably already read the title that is there in big letters. This one is called DIY. I was too lazy to read documentation, so I made my own dialogue tool. So without further ado, let's just get started. First, I'm going to talk a bit about myself, then what it is that I'm actually working on, and then why I chose to go down the DIY route, and lastly, just about my general work processes and motivations that went into this whole thing. So, hi, my name is Theo, online also known as Snek. I started getting into game dev in 2016 with physical card game development, and then I started getting into Godot in 2021 when I was still in uni studying media informatics. Through that, I also landed a position at Bip and Bits, who some of you or most of you will probably know. Like, they're the people that back then released Domekeeper, so I was on that team for about a year. And now I work at Klutch Interactive as a junior game designer. But today I'm just here on my own, representing my own stuff. And that stuff would be this thing, Dices. It's a dialogue system that I started working on about a year ago in October 2023. And I've been working on it on and off since then. So the cumulative development time of it has been about like 8 months. It's just a tool, runs in Godot, runs in the editor, all of that good stuff. As you can see from the very tiny GitHub stats, this is really just a personal pet project of mine. This isn't like anything big really in that sense. So this entire talk you can understand as more of just like an experience report more than anything else. So how did this thing start? Well, about a year ago, I stumbled upon the Yuri Game Jam, which is a really relaxed game jam that has a time allowance of 2 months. And I had always just generally liked the idea of working on my own dialogue system, and 2 months seemed doable to pull that off. So I worked on Dices for about a month and a half, and then that left me with 3 weeks to actually build build something with the tool that I had just constructed. Off that came this game, When the Sea Received the Sky. It's a visual novel, and as such, it has all of the basic bearings of that. We have a character sprite that we can animate with a text box, and have respond to emotions. We can control the background image and all of that from within one singular tool that I built, and that was just pretty neat. As I already mentioned, this one was a visual novel. In case you're not entirely familiar, it's basically just like a book, but it has images. You click, you read the story. Sometimes there's choices to present to the player. This fairly narrow scope gave me some requirements to work towards. So I needed to be able to display character sprites, do all kinds of visual and auditory timings, so fade in backgrounds, background music, handle input, do text flow control like pauses and stuff. And yeah, that was just the feature list of what I needed to put in the tool at that point in time. So I just got into work. This is what it looked like back then. At the top, we have some tools and navigation and stuff. And the structure of this entire plugin is that every document is structured into pages, and each page has a given set of lines, and a line can be of varying types. So here in this example, we have 2 text lines that would present text to the player, and then we could also present choices to the player with different lines, or have function calls directly to Godot. Back then, this wasn't even conceptualized as a tool. It was still conceptualized as standalone software, but after the Yuri Jam, I realized that that just didn't really mesh with my workflow, and so I refactored the entire thing and made it into a tool that I can also use as a plugin. This is what it looks like nowadays. As you can see, it just has grown into more things. This is just a screenshot from my current project. The basic structure is still the same. We have the navigation up top. We have lines at the bottom. And yeah, now you just roughly know what this entire system looks like, so we can depart to the rest of this talk. And for that, we start with one very obvious question. Why didn't I use anything else that was already out there? And the simple answer for that is I just didn't want to like I was aware of other options, obviously. Probably most famously, Dialogic exists. I've also heard good things about like Nylon, and even just if you just look up Dialog in the asset library, there's just a bunch of stuff there. Um, the whole issue with all of these is I just had no real like drive to learn any external tools, so I just didn't want to. This is just like the whole like negative column of this entire situation. But you know, when you want to do something, you should also have like a positive drive behind it. And so we get to the flip side of this, which is that I have been here before. Earlier in 2023, I worked on a different game called Sunders Horizon that already had a very rudimentary dialogue structure in it. This was just like a dictionary with a few functions that interacted with it. So it had a bunch of like arcane jank behind it, but it worked. We could display text to the player and give them choices. Isn't that neat? And this small project gave me this idea that at some point in the future, I just wanted to be able to say that I actually worked on a proper dialogue system. And then the Yuri Jam happened, and the 2 months time allowance of that, like I said, just compelled me to actually start with that like desire for real. And so I just got to work, really. I just started by copying the barebound structure that was already present in Sanders Horizon, tried to just implement a version of that. And here I went in with the following work philosophy, which is that it's just okay to do things incorrectly, so to say, or badly, or only as good as you need them to be. This is mostly predicated on the fact that, it is often said that mastery requires like 10,000 hours to achieve. So that's a lot of time, which means that if you wait to actually get good at what you want to do before you start doing it, you'll never get anywhere. You in generally only have limited time, and especially talking about free time, like your free time in general, and especially under capitalism, is just too limited and too valuable to be wasted on waiting to get started or to do something DIY in your free time without any passion behind it. That is why the actual bars that I want to clear with my development processes for these like solo pet projects is that I will only work on things as far as it is necessary, either to their like functionality or my like ambition for it. So if I don't like something, then I'll just make it functional. But if I do like something, then I can work on it to my heart's content, basically. And now I have to admit, I lied to you, sadly. This talk was titled something with DIY, but there is no true DIY. So now I'm going to talk about how you will always take something from others regardless of what you want to do. As I mentioned, when the series Received This Guy worked, it proved that working on dices was doable. It produced games that I enjoyed working on and presenting to people. So it was time to expand. I wanted to implement a system for like world state tracking and persistent player choices. And here I can shout out these two talks. The devs of Firewatch have two really good GDC talks about the ways in which they implement world state tracking. And so I just kind of ripped off what they outlined in their GDC talks, implemented it, built a game to stress test my implementation of that system on XHard. And that worked, and that was really cool. And that was just another step of confirmation that I can successfully work on this project in my free time, build upon it, and just create cool things with it. But, working with the intellectual foundation that others had already provided. Another example I want to give here is the undo and redo system for the tool. Undo and redo systems are kind of difficult to get right, especially if you have to retroactively graft them onto a middlingly programmed software, it turns out. And so I wanted to rely on at least, undo redo existing. It is a utility class in Godot that you can call and has whatever functionality you need for like undo and redo operations. And by now it just does so much heavy lifting for me. And that's neat. Here I want to shout out Godot in general for just being great for personal projects, because it has so many different utility classes and functions that make it really really easy and like low stakes to just iterate on ideas, because it has so many functionalities it can provide to you. as I continued working on dices, I also got some more realizations about this entire working process, which is that if you want to do something yourself, you will have to do it yourself, come hell or high water. So if you're bad at it or you're scared of it, that just means that you have to do it badly or you have to do it scared. But in the end, that is still a worthwhile process because it is just so damn empowering to build your own tools. The act of creation, the process of building up your own stuff feels really good to me. And when you end up with a working software artifact, that just feels empowering, like I said. Lastly, what I also mentioned, you will always take from others and other places and just build upon that. And the true nature of DIY is this. In actuality, you just set like a baseline, like a canon background of what you consider to be there already, and then you start DIYing off of that. I didn't start like building something in assembly or building an entire engine. I just worked upon Godot, and then that is where DIY started to kicking in. Now, let's talk about some production realities. Ideally, for me, development would look like this. I'd have a few weeks or months of Dice's development where I would just, do development stuff, add new features, fix bugs, and then I would get into some game jam, work on a game, and during that development process, I would discover, things I want to improve on, add, whatever, and then take that back into the development minds and work on that. In reality, we run into like this little complication, which is that, again, this is like my solo pet project. No one has ever tested anything here for like stability, so everything kind of constantly breaks, and you're just on your own in that sense. And that can be really disheartening at some points. But, you just learn to kind of roll with it. Currently, like even right now, the main repo of like the plugin is frozen because I'm in a game jam right now. But I still do just hot fixes and additions in my local version of the plugin because I need to fix stuff, and then I'll just add that to the repo after the game jam. And you have to have kind of fun doing this hell cycle for hours on end on some days. And if you want to like do solo projects like these, because if you can't have fun during that, then you will just die. And as I'm describing, these are arduous processes. So how can you stick with personal projects like these? First, I want to talk time management. If you can allow yourself to be unemployed without the threat of existential annihilation, then it's a pretty good time to work on your personal projects, assuming you actually put in work as if it were something like your full-time job. It also allows you to, build upon your portfolio if your portfolio has some overlap with where you want to work in the future. So for me, I'm kind of all over game development, so Dices just goes into my portfolio as well, which can then help me get a job. In the moments where I do find myself employed, then I will just sometimes have entire days of nothing but like day job work and Dices work. But that's fine because it's fun, and we'll get to that in a bit. Then in terms of time efficiency, leverage all of the prior knowledge that you have. As I mentioned, I started studying in 2019, so arguably it has been almost like 5 years since I started getting into software development. There have been so many failures that never even saw the light of day. But those failures were what allowed me to be able to pull off Dices in the first place. And furthermore, just this familiarity with projects in general is also really helpful. I went into many different tasks completely blind in terms of their implementation detail, but I was still familiar with a project and working on software in general, and that was really helpful to this entire development process. Oh yeah. Sometimes I do nothing but that without the eating. Now let's talk about intrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation is really cool. It is also incredibly hard to come by sometimes. And one way I found to make yourself be intrinsically motivated in the things that you want to be motivated for is that you make your projects meaningful to you. To me, Dices is meaningful for 2 reasons. The first one is that I've just built cool projects with it, and that's fun. The second one is what the rest of the slide is going to be about. So let's start with an anecdote. A few months ago, I was asked by a friend what my favorite part of tool development was for dices, and I responded with character design. So this will be the first call to action I will give to you in a series of call to actions as we wrap this thing up. You should anthropomorphize the software that you work on. In certain markets, you will find OS stance as like anthropomorphized anime girl versions of operating systems and their respective software suites. We have a similar thing in Godot, even with Godot, who sometimes shows up on like shirts and blog posts and demos and stuff. So I just did the same thing. I designed my own anime robot girls, and I use them kind of, I guess, as like mascots for dices. And, you know, what does this have to do with motivation again? Well, it allows me to think of tools as more than just tools. It allows me to view them also as a vessel of like aesthetic and creative expression. Also, you can kind of be not normal about this shit. It allows me to think of refactoring code as having to rearrange their mechanical parts, and that feels really good to my brain. And here I want to reiterate that I think you should just in general be kind of deranged about your work, kind of be horny about it maybe, and just have fun with your work. Because again, we're talking about like personal DIY projects. If they're not fun to pursue, it is okay to just abandon them and then do nothing with them ever again. Speaking of like why this works as intrinsic motivation, personal intrinsic motivation is a resilient type of intrinsic motivation. Resilience in this case means it is difficult to supplant with extrinsic motivation. Say you gain some extrinsic motivation, like, I don't know, getting a lot of GitHub stars in a repository, and then eventually that influx of stars would just subside, and then that extrinsic motivation would just fade away, you would lose your motivation, you wouldn't work on your project anymore, that would suck and be sad. The more intrinsically and personally tied you are to your motivation, the more difficult it is for this like supplantation process to take place. Another call to action I want to give to you is that you should just create more of the things that you want to see in the world. I personally really like the idea of like a weird, like nerdy writer girl working on this esoteric narrative construct, and so I just am that. Because like if you don't put in the work, no one will. This is speaking mostly from an indie experience, but things just don't always bubble up to the surface. And so for many people, you will be the first person to do something cool and unique, and that is an opportunity that you should grasp at. And building your own weird little tools is one way to achieve that. Continuing this wrap up, let's just talk about some general pros and cons of DIY. You don't generally do it to like be better than anyone else or replace any other existing project. In most cases, just cooperation or contribution to existing projects would be better in the sense that it would probably have more use case for more people. Or at least if you are good enough to do that, then you could probably do it as like your job, I guess. You also don't do it to have stable projects necessarily. At least this is true if you go into this like me, kind of, where I still had fairly little experience and expertise with what makes a dialogue system just tick. And so what do you do DIY for then? Well, you learn software development for one. Maybe you discover code paradigms from first principles. You learn about scalability of code maintenance, bug fixing, all that stuff. You just in general build skills and portfolio, and because hopefully you create something cool and something that you're proud of with your projects. And especially talking about tooling, you hopefully end up with something that is designed exactly how you find it logical, which feels really good to work with too. And just in general, again, it's fun to work on stuff sometimes, so that's another nice thing. Now, final concluding slide. Why make a tool that already exists from scratch? It's fun, you learn stuff, and it is also reusable between projects, and building up your own tool suite feels also kind of nice. On semi-related points, I would still urge you to maybe look into other tools. There is a big ecosystem around you, and maybe someone else has done what you wanted to do already, and then you could either just use their tool or use it as an inspiration for your own. But again, that's like advice, maybe. I didn't do that for most of the development of this, and I'm still fine and alive here, so, you know, maybe do that. Also, find your motivations in like why you actually want to do things, so you understand why they make your brain feel good. So yes, please go out, create cool and fun projects that are just sick to see in the world. Oops. That's it. Like this QR code leads to my itch page. We can like have questions now. Thank you for your time. Yes.
Thanks for the talk, by the way. I really feel seen by it. But the issue I always have is I have too much motivation to do too many things, and I'm struggling to commit to something, to one of the billion things I'd like to do. It's like always, I could do that awesome thing if I committed to it, but I don't know if I should. Do you have any advice for that?
Yeah, so that also kind of mirrors the experience of many like more inexperienced game developers, where their first game idea is this like grand, big World of Warcraft killer that is impossible to implement. And I would just mirror the advice from those strata of like experience, where it is the most important part to just get anything done really at first. And so if you have a bunch of cool ideas, then the game designer in me will also respond with ideas are cheap and don't really mean that much, but you know, your ideas are still cool, and talking about them is really good. And just you pick one thing that you can see actually the completion of in some fashion, right? When I started working on this initial visual novel, when the series received this guy, I still didn't know what I was going to look at the end, but I knew I wanted text boxes, character sprite, background sprite, and basically nothing else. I just wanted to like be able to have a bunch of text and then go, okay, please make a pause there so the player doesn't like get an actual book in front of their face. And you know, it's just scope down, and then you know, work on that with like maybe 2 or 3 months of maximum development time, and then see where that leads you. Maybe it doesn't lead you anywhere, but you know, getting anything done is better than just thinking about getting something done. So yeah.
So, first of all, cool talk. Second, I find that when you create new tools just for yourself, one of the main pros of it is that you find new workflows that fit specifically for you. Have you found any specific workflows in your dialogue system that you haven't seen in other systems that worked really well?
Okay, so I will answer both of those questions that you posited, which is that firstly, no, I have no idea what the workflows of other like big dialogue systems are, but I know that the one that I created for this, or the one that kind of existed within me and I forced upon this godforsaken creation, is that I just start writing wherever the fuck I want. So I will have like some random phone note with like 2,000 words, or like a message in Telegram to myself of like some dialogue scene. And as you can imagine, that's just like in like text format, which is really useless to paste into like GUI, where you, for every single line, you have to be like, okay, please, you know, drop down menu, emotion, next slide. Oh wait, some fucking reference to somewhere else. So the ways that in which, wait, let me go back. So the way in which I built that works with this is that all of the dialogue is just completely string-based. You can maybe kind of see it here, like it's just, you know, some syntax to like initiate, hey, please say a text, and then it's just name of whoever is saying it, colon, and then text, which means that when I create dialogue, I can literally just go, okay, initial letter of the character that's speaking, colon, whatever text is in my head that moment, and then just do that for the entirety, and then to convert it into a usable script I can use within Dices, I just have to like hit find and replace for like this initial like letter, replace it with some syntactic sugar to make Dices recognize it as like dialogue text, and then it works. So I can just wake up deliriously at 3 a.m., punch out a bunch of dialogue, and like, you know, go back to sleep without leaving my bed, and then still have like a usable, workable like dialogue for the project, which is kind of neat.
Hi. First, thanks for the talk. And did you notice any emergent thing in this? Like, I did not develop this for this, to do this, but turns out I can do this.
Yes, actually, and we see it right here. Like every line in Dices has like these kind of meta properties. Like I don't know, I had a semester of web development, so this thing is called header. And header is really cool, but really fucking useless. What header does is I can insert any like data in there, and that is like, you know, we get to the line, and Dices handles the header of whatever behavior I define for that within that project. So I can be like, hey, we have like this integer, we have this array, whatever the fuck. No one uses that shit. No, I don't need that. What is way more relevant is what I added after, which are conditionals and facts. These two are from the Firewatch thing that I talked about. These are like just booleans or integers of, hey, when we hit this line, please say that you have met a character and set that boolean to true, and that is way more useful. So this also ties into general like software development practices. For every feature that you implement, have some use case in mind already. Otherwise, you waste a huge bunch of development time, and that is shit you have to maintain down the line, which sucks.
Firstly, cool talk. Secondly, like in terms of like just dialogue systems on the front end, in terms of like what's displayed to the player. Do you have any like favorite sort of like features just like that just add like intrigue and coolness to dialogue systems? Any like features which you think like, you know, should be used more often? Just like any cool little things to enhance dialogue?
What do you mean with intrigue?
You know, like like sometimes like, you know, the text starts vibrating and goes all red and big when the character is shouting, that kind of stuff. Like anything like that, just like, you know, add spice.
Okay, yeah. I think that just depends. I will give the game designer answer. It depends. There are game projects that heavily rely on like visual consistency, and you know, when a character speaks, it always has this color, which means that if you subvert that expectation for any scene, suddenly this has a bunch of relevance. Whereas if you have a game that is predisposed of a bunch of different like BB code in GD script, it would be like, you know, for rich text labels and animations and stuff, that wouldn't hit as hard. So I can't give you like a universal answer. What I have found is that generally staring at a screen without it changing for any amount of time sucks. So what I attempt to do is my direction. So what I attempt to do is that, you know, for every like line that we read, or like for most of them, we have some switch up in character sprites. So usually I will have like, you know, like 2 or 3 varying idle sprites that have like small, subtle, like emotional differences. Sometimes you can also add stuff like character sway, or just stuff with shaders, I think is really underutilized, just because like most people that go into visual novels don't even use Godot, but even those that do are still mostly from a not that technical background. And so many more technical focused solutions, you know, like shaders and stuff, and more programmatically do stuff, sometimes falls by the wayside, I guess, and people rely on out-of-the-box functionality a lot, which isn't bad, by the way. Like, it's great that tools have these wide feature sets to present to players, but yeah, like, if you can implement custom stuff and have the bandwidth for it in your production, that's really cool, and the polish will get noticed by players of like, hey, wait, I've never seen this effect before. What the fuck did they do? And you can respond, I did that. Yeah. And I think we're out of time, so thank you all for being here.